off with saying, in life, people fail to realize the critical aspect of how to grow wealth. It's not about how much money you make, but it's about how much money you can save. So to illustrate this, I have person A who makes $40,000 a year and they spend $20,000 a year. In this case, you just subtract them very simply and they save $20,000. Now person B makes $80,000 a year, so they make double what person A makes. However, they also spend a lot more money. They are spending $70,000 a year, in which case they have $10K saved. So in this case, person A, even though they're making less money, will grow their wealth faster because $20,000 will be working for him while person B only has $10,000. The question then becomes, well then, how do I get started? To which Robert says, to become rich, you must become financially literate. Accounting is boring and confusing, so Rich Dad needed to be able to teach this to some really small kids. He did it by teaching in pictures. And rich people acquire assets, while poor and middle class acquire a bunch of liabilities that they think are assets. So now we're going to go back to when he was a kid. No assets versus liabilities. Rich Dad starts us off by saying, the rich get more assets while the poor and middle class buy liabilities that they think are assets. To which Mike has a very astute question. What's an asset? We'll get to that. Just keep saying that phrase in your head for a while. The phrase is so simple, yet so powerful. So if we know what an asset is and we just keep buying them, then will that make us rich? Yes, it's that easy. If it's that easy, then why isn't everyone buying assets? They don't know the difference between the two. An asset puts money in my pocket. A liability takes money out of my pocket. So this gets us into the quadrant system that Rich Dad came up with as a method for teaching accounting to very small children. We're going to get into how to use this quadrant system, but for now, I recommend that you get an 8.5 by 11 sheet of computer paper and you recreate everything you see on the right-hand side of the screen. All the words, the style. We're going to get into how to utilize this very shortly, but for now, I recommend doing that. Okay, so let's start with understanding the quadrants and how they interact. So the top part is called the income statement. With the income statement, it's all about money coming in and money coming out. So money coming in, that is income, and money coming out, that is expenses. The bottom part is called the balance sheet, and this is the balance between the assets and liabilities. Assets being something that will continually put money into your pocket, liabilities, something that will continually take money out of your pocket. The arrows, which we're going to get into very shortly, shows the cash flow. And the cash flow shows how money is moving around from the income statement to the balance sheet and vice versa. So let's just very generically show the relationship flowing from the quadrants for assets. So for assets, it flows from the assets down in the balance sheet and goes into the income in the income statement. So let's just say very simply that we have dividend stocks. So we purchased an asset right here. Now, since it is an asset, it is going to be putting money into our pocket. So we are going to draw an arrow, our cash flow statement, and there it is. We now have more money in our income statement with our income because we purchased assets. Last slide, we talked about the cash flow pattern of assets. Now we're going to talk about the cash flow pattern of liabilities. You can probably guess where this is going, but I'm going to go over it regardless. So let's just very generically show the relationship flowing from the quadrants for liabilities. Liabilities flows from the liabilities in the balance sheet to the expenses in the income statement. Liabilities, something that takes money out of our pocket. So now we have some sort of liability. Maybe we needed a loan for something. Maybe we took out a loan for a car. So now it's going to flow from the balance sheet in the liabilities up to the expenses, and now we have increased our expenses. The simple accounting to being rich. This is the core to becoming rich. Buy more assets to increase income and avoid liabilities to decrease expenses. Keep increasing income while avoiding expenses, and you'll become rich. What do most people do? Can you show us the cash flow of poor, middle, and upper class people? Sure thing. All right, so now we're going to start getting into the cash flow patterns of most poor people, most middle class people, and most rich people. Of course, there's going to be exceptions. Some people might say, well, I'm middle class and I don't have those things, but these are just very generic assumptions. So for most poor people, as defined by Rich Dad, they only have one source of income, which typically that is their salary from their job. So they have some sort of job right here, and the cash flow looks just like this. It comes into the income, that's where they're getting money from the job, and then they have expenses, just like everybody else. They have taxes, they have rent, they have basic living needs, and there it goes, and out it goes. And as for their assets, typically they don't have any, and for their liabilities, they have none or very few. And now we're going to get into what most middle class people do and have for their cash flow pattern. And this is, of course, just like I said before, just an assumption. It is the general case. There are exceptions, of course, but this is typically how Rich Dad explains how most middle class people have for their cash flow pattern. So just like before, we only have one source of income, our salary from our job. Since we're middle class, we have more money from our job, so we have more money coming in. Now you also see that we have liabilities. So now we have mortgages, school loans, credit card debt, car loans, whatever. Now this is going to go into our expenses and fuel our expenses. So now it's pumping it up because of our balance sheet. It's going in there. So let's go from our job. We made some money. We have our work week. And now we get taxed. We have to make car payments, school loans, credit card payments, whatever. And out it goes. So now we're going to make the assumption that they have a little bit extra money. So let's say after all of our expenses, and then we take it out of our income, we have $500 after the month. So what are we going to do with this $500? Well, Richard explains that for most middle class people, when they have extra money, all they do is increase their expenses even more rather than saving. And when you increase your expenses, that extra money you had just goes away. It's like it never happened. Instead of doing what Rich Dad suggests, which is taking that arrow that comes out of the expenses and dragging it into the assets. All right, and now we're going to get into the cash flow pattern of most rich people. As you can see, for the 0.1% of folks out there, they typically don't have this job that's an external source that they rely on. That's gone. Now, what they have is things that they purchased and they personally own. They purchased assets, and that is what is going into their income statement for their income. So we're going to drag the assets, and they are putting money into their pocket. It goes right in there. They could get dividends, interest, royalties, whatever. The assets that we have currently for this rich person includes real estate, bonds, stocks, intellectual property, and various businesses. And just like before, rich people also have liabilities, some sort of loans that they have, and it goes into our expenses. So now we're going to continue the arrow. We are going back to the income statement, some sort of number for the income, and then subtract the expenses for each month. Out it goes, and we get some sort of number. So since this is the 0.1% of folks out there, we're going to say that they get $1 billion. $1 billion is what they're left with each month after the income minus the expenses. So Rich Dad, the lesson that he's trying to teach is, instead of using that money and buying more things for your expenses, what you should instead do is use that money that comes from income minus expenses and continue the arrow. Now this is going back into the assets. So let's just say 750 million of that is buying even more assets. Well, if you're buying even more assets, guess what? Now we're going to have more income. So in it goes, and we increased our net money per month. So if we're doing the same thing, the cycle continues, it goes round and round, and this is how the rich keep getting richer. It's because they keep buying assets while most people don't. And that is the lesson that Rich Dad is trying to teach us in this chapter. You want to increase your income by buying assets, and you want to lower your expenses and lower the amount of liabilities that you have.